Asari. I think it's an amazing presentation that you have started, and I think you've set up the stage for Asia Pacific and introducing some of the key factors which we are going to be discussing in this panel as well. So first of all, I would like to welcome to this APAC panel 1, which is at Uptime, where we will be discussing one of the most strategically important shifts in the enterprise connectivity today, as we started, as Nanda mentioned earlier, is private 5G deployments across Asia. And over the last 3 to 5 years, private 5G has moved decisively beyond proof of concept. We are now seeing scaled deployments across various verticals like mining, ports, manufacturing, utilities, energy, defense, and various other sectors, which are even moving to mission critical deployments. And as Asia represents a unique, complex, and diverse landscape because of as we all know, it is because of diverse spectrum regimes, which are licensed, shared, enterprise, varied regulatory maturity across the markets. And then there are different enterprise adoption curves, which are like in the innovation hubs and cost sensitivity, industrial segments and all. So today's panel, we bring together leaders who are representing 3 critical dimensions of private 5G. We already heard Hari Kumar. He leads the Indonesian enterprise perspective. So he will be giving his views on how he sees across Indonesia and the development of private 5G. We've already heard a good presentation from him, but we'll query him more on some of the key questions. And then we'll also have an Indian operator and regulatory landscape, which is covered by our Gopalkrishnan, who is the CTIO for the enterprise on VI India. And then looking at also the APAC device and infrastructure ecosystem, where we have across the region is Jayant Moghe, who's AVP of 5G communications and products at Pegatron. And together, we all will explore on private 5G, from isolated deployments to scalable industrial deployments. And today's discussion, where we are focusing on, is on private 5G gaining real commercial, spectrum, deployment architectures, device ecosystem, and commercial models. So I'd like to start off by bringing Hari on the first query. And the question, very interesting ask that we see is how to scale it responsibility, profitably, and also sustainability across different verticals. And Pahari, if you're there, yeah. So like Indonesia has a very strong demand, like as you mentioned in your pack, about mining, oil and gas, ports, and smart industrial estates. What is the biggest structural barrier slowing down private 5G adoption in Indonesia today? I mean, how do you see it in terms of spectrum, policy, enterprise readiness, or commercial models? Where do you see Indonesia market stands?
Thanks, Kunal. So if you're looking at, we see a good demand from various industries, especially mining, oil and gas, and even the ports. However, you're asking about barriers, right?
Yes.
We primarily see 2 main barriers from our experience on the ground here. The first one is the spectrum scarcity. So we have limited spectrum. On the XL Smart side, we have 50 megahertz on our N40 band, and we have 2 by 10 megahertz on the N5. So these bands are already congested in our urban areas for public 4G traffic, hence severely limiting our options for private network deployment in urban areas. So in areas where our manufacturing, ports, hospitals, utility companies, these are all in urban areas. So it's difficult for us to refarm and run our private network there. However, the private network deployment is happening more in the rural area, especially on the mining concession areas, which are very far from the population. So that areas gives us more flexibility. Second barrier we see is actually is the commercial model and the initial investment from the enterprises. So maybe what I can say is the demand is there, but the appetite is not. So only when there are regulation concerns or safety compliance, then the enterprises which need to run the OT or CCTV or IoT requirement mandate, then they lead into private network. But companies still use Wi-Fi first. And once Wi-Fi hits the performance envelope, or interference or scale issues, then they look for alternatives. That's where private network comes in now. Maybe in
No, I
my
think
view,
Pahari.
we need to bring the 5G SA, or private network solution, very close to the simplicity and the ease of setup as a Wi-Fi. I think that will be the inflection point for the Indonesian market.
Absolutely. No, I think very nicely put in. Definitely, Wi-Fi has been there for a very long time, and the IT teams of the enterprise, they have adopted and accepted the kind of ease of deployment, and they're looking at 5G as well, bringing in that kind of efficiency in deploying all of this. So I think it's very well said, Pahari, and I'll move on to a different market which has a very similar view of how things are moving. I'll invite Mr. Gopalkrishnan on, and I'll be querying you in terms of let's say what are the most common integration challenges when deploying private 5G alongside existing Wi-Fi, MPLS, or legacy industrial networks that you've seen in India? Because I think India, as Vodafone Idea, you've been pioneering in deploying private 5G, and I believe you have seen some of the I would say very closely some of those challenges. So what, on your view, have this private network challenges been in India market?
Thank you, Kunal. Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening to everybody. I think Hari covered it well. One of the barriers of private 5G is also the interoperability issues, actually. So while he nicely covered saying that the requirement is being fueled by what cannot be done by Wi-Fi, therefore the 5G perspective is coming in. But I see, I've read it somewhere, there is an entity report which says that almost 45 to 46% of production deployments are not happening because of the huge barrier of interoperability between the legacy systems and the new one. The adoption is not happening because of the enterprises not able to transform themselves from the legacy system to the new system. I've seen it myself almost 2 years back. As you rightly said, before I step in, I just quickly introduce myself. My name is Gopalkrishnan. I head the technology function for enterprise, and I'm also the IoT business head. I'm wearing two responsibilities. I like the way Harry put it, like private 5G and IoT goes in hand. Actually, that's how the industry is moving. That's the right way of seeing the product pillar from an enterprise standpoint. So, having said that, while the Indian enterprises show a lot of interest in that transforming to 5G, but they are struggling in terms of IT/OT integration challenges and also transforming their legacy system to the new requirements. And most of them have kind of engineered or architectured to the Wi-Fi environment where old PLCs, old dongle kind of a model, then transforming them to 5G. Their actual production ecosystem or a manufacturing ecosystem is a big challenge. And of course, on top of it, you put the applications, you put the network, and also the security layer on top of it, it becomes much more cumbersome. I think what we are seeing is that the companies who see who have the demand and also have the appetite and also the courage to transform the network. I've seen few of them have already done that and started gaining their advantages or moving ahead in adopting to 5G. But most importantly, 5G is just not a speed. It also, of course, requires the right use case fitment, the low latency, security embedding. We see that if the enterprises just wanted to replace the technology, I don't think it's going to work out, and it's not working out. We have seen that they've started embarking upon doing the pilot on 5G, and then it gets fizzled out after a few months or so because there are no killer use cases which actually befits the 5G deployment. And of course, Hari talked about the capex requirements, spectrum problems, and also the actual use case download uploads parts. All of them uh, kind of either impede or kind of progress towards the production deployment. While it is an evolving space, interoperability and then transforming from the legacy system to the new system, and then enterprises' ability to fit the right use case, therefore they start pushing their management for investments and so on and so forth, are the critical problem we face or we see on a daily basis on the POCs and whatever the interactions that we do with multiple. And I also agree with what Hari said. In India, it is more denser country. So the challenges of activating a private 5G in an urban area is becoming almost impossible. Therefore, by default, the use cases move to the rural places. The mines and the factories, all these places are the places where a pilot to production progression happening faster. While it is coming into denser urban population, it is becoming difficult because of creating the buffer zone architecture. It is becoming problem. In fact, I have seen one of the largest shipping company having done POC for 6 months and finally moved on to a public network to fulfill their requirements. So that's how the environment is shaping up in India. Of course, it promises a lot of things. Enterprises adoption depends on how they kind of transform themselves.
No, I think it's an amazing view. And I think one of the most important things that you talked about was the use case adoptions. And use cases are actually driving the need of private networks. And the maturity of these use cases to be developed on private 5G, I think that's where there is a small gap that needs to be caught up quickly so that the adoption of private 5G. And I think you also brought a very interesting perspective of private 5G moving away from urban to rural areas, which is again we see the faster adoption or the early adoptions are happening. I'll move to Jayant Moghe, and from an OEM perspective across Asia Pacific, what is the most common gaps you see when enterprise attempt to scale from pilot to production private 5G deployments? So what are your views on the ecosystem maturity across the region?
Right. Thank you, Kunal, for having me on this panel. Again, greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and salamat datang. So, a bit about me, just a very quick half a minute. Got 30 plus years in the industry, most decades with Ericsson, almost 3 years with Gopalkrishnan's company in Mumbai with VI, and then now with Pegatron, in between a short stint with Mavnir as well, where I started with private 5G about 5 years ago. So Gen 1 private 5G. One of the challenges, and I think both Hari and Gopalkrishnan have actually covered a lot of the challenges, especially when you look at from an APAC market. APAC region, has a complex, if you look at Japan, Korea, and Taiwan, where Pegatron is from, they have dedicated spectrum. All the other countries where I operate from, in India, we do not. And as both of them have mentioned, they create those challenges. Secondly, also one is the see, when you talk about private 5G, you have to look at both greenfield as well as brownfield, where you already have existing legacy systems, and nobody throws, especially manufacturing companies, etc. They are very risk averse and very conservative. Nobody wants to throw what they have already. So the whole challenge is one of how do you interoperate. How do you? I have I'll try and translate it from Hindi to English. I have a saying, what they want is Sundar Sasta Tikau, which means it's got to be, just the right amount of features, like a Goldilocks. They don't need huge amount of features. Works very well. Automation, it's like a IT deployment. Has to have a good TCO, and as in everything that you do in the industry, it needs to be long lasting in terms of the the life cycle, etc. So I think those are three things I have noticed being in the telecom industry, that and especially in this region, and it doesn't change for private 5G either. The other aspect is also when you scale up, you also have to look at the human dimension. One is of you do have to train up people, and that becomes a constant exercise as you bring in and introduce new technology. And we have that example from our own deployment at our factory in Batam, which is across 3 floors and 85,000 square meters, where we have deployed a private 5, our Pegatron private 5G network together with Telecomcell which is where Pegatron manufactures globally its 5G devices, cameras, CPs, dongles, etc. and a lot of AI use cases, AI which is developed by Pegatron, which have been deployed at that factory. And some of these factors did pop up in terms of ongoing, training of human resources, etc. As you start to adopt new technologies. So that is definitely one has to look forward to, or you have to be aware of, and also to ensure a success. You don't go all in. You start with an area where you have you can deploy 5G, get that success, and then start looking at use cases across the enterprise rather than giving a big bang approach. You do a scaled approach, and that's how you, at a pace which an enterprise is comfortable with, you move inside the enterprise to have.
No, I think Jayant, very, very nicely put in terms of, I think, as you correctly mentioned, scaling is, of course, one of the most important points for an enterprise, and starting nimble with doing a small scale and then moving it to a larger scale and then bringing in on use cases. I'll take another perspective of looking at a private 5G or a private operated private 5G network. And so we move to a different dimension where it looks at how do you manage these private networks. So, Pahari, I'll come back to you on this question. Where
Kunal, 7 minutes left, and
okay.
There's also a question just to let you know,
okay,
so that you can manage it. Okay, yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you. So, Pahari, quickly, maybe a few words, if you can just explain. In Indonesia, do enterprise operators prefer operator-led model, managed private 5G, or a dedicated standalone enterprise-owned networks, and why? In business modeling.
Yeah, Kunal, I'll take that question. And yeah, in Indonesia, market is now leaning towards operator-led private 5G. I mean, of course, regulation is one thing because government doesn't or has not given a dedicated band or spectrum to the enterprises. But on the other hand, why they prefer that is because three things, I think. Number one, the financial flexibility. So enterprises don't have upfront capex or massive upfront capex. So they prefer an OpEx-based subscription model, and operators are in a position to do that. In certain customers, they even pay us, or the payment model is based on SIM card. So per SIM basis. So 1,000 SIM, 1,000 users, that is how they pay us. And secondly, I see also on the talent side, enterprises don't have that managed services team and they have to build, right? Whereas for us, it's actually part of our core operations to manage another private network similar to our mobile network. So then the enterprises can focus on their core operations like mining or logistics and leave the MNO to handle the network part. Third one is on economy of scale. Because we deploy many, so economy of scale in terms of installation costs, many service costs will be lower. Plus, we can always bring our best practices, either whether it's from the capacity planning, coverage plan, and how we deploy, how we dimension things. So I think those are the reasons.
The skill sets, what you mentioned, drive the adoption of managing the private networks, and I think operators are far more well versed in the Indonesia market. I'll move to the Indian market as well. So, Gopal, from your perspective, do Indian enterprise prefer to be fully managed private 5G services from operators, or they are also looking at some kind of a greater ownership and control over their network? What is your view from the Indian perspective of the market?
I think when the 5G deployment started by all the telcos in India, there was a lot of rush to kind of adopt the private 5G within Indian enterprises. There were a lot of people evince interest to become the system integrated, to become a 5G player to the enterprise. But of late, I am seeing, at least what we are seeing it is that, as Hari rightly pointed out, we are seeing 5G is moving towards an operator-led 5G model, because 5G, if you look at 5G and IoT go hand in hand, because use cases define the overall ROI of the overall requirement. Therefore, telcos are rightly positioned to kind of unravel this. Why I'm saying that is that, of course, upfront capex enterprises cannot put. Now, more and more, we are seeing 5G network is going on a pay as per use kind of a model, as a service model, 5G as a service model. Plus, 5G is not just a network, it's not just a technology, it's an enabler. Therefore, the right sizing, the way the solutioning has to get architectured. One side, it's an ecosystem play when I say entire 5G private network. One side, you have the devices, other side, network is enabling, then the northbound, you have the applications, and then the user experience, and the real business outcome or a KPI you want to talk about. And telcos are ideally positioned to control the end-to-end view of or end-to-end production or a productive KPIs of it. Therefore, now of late, I'm seeing in Indian market also, telco-led opportunities are going up. Of course, regulation is playing a very strong role here, because in India also spectrum is regulated. Therefore, there is no clear view on how the enterprise is going to go. And telcos also, in fact, Vodafone Idea, we have already started working towards that. Rather than going to the enterprise with an upfront capex, we are looking at how we can offer the services on a 5G as a service model. I think these are all cases evolving. And in Vodafone, since we have a very strong IoT business practice, we are looking at it as a holistic opportunity. We are not looking any 5G opportunity as a 5G network implementation opportunity. We are looking at it therefore, enterprises wants to give the control or the responsibility to one player end to end, rather than having a dispersed ownership of somebody's bringing the network, somebody's bringing the spectrum, somebody's managing the applications and OTIT integration, so on and so forth. So it is in India also, it is
very
moving
well
towards managed services model.
Absolutely. And I think we totally agree in these markets, looking at the ecosystem challenges of the regulator, that's where the operator-led business is helping to catapult the 5G. I'll go quickly to Jayant Moghe. And I think, Jayant, quickly in few words, from South Asia perspective, if you look at until Australia, Japan, which vertical, as per you, is driving the strongest real 5G SA adoption? And why? Maybe just in few words, if you could summarize.
I think one of the reasons of private 5G is a lot of enterprises do not want their data flowing out of their premises. On premises, because they have data, they have security requirements that was alluded to. They want to keep it within the enterprise, whether the enterprise is single location or multiple location. That's and with SA 5G, and I'll leave the traditional players out, but you have private 5G core which are adapted for enterprise deployment. So those then really allow you to do on-premises SA deployment. It's like a wireless PBX. You have a network on the premises, and what is really driving currently is coverage across, I would say, infrastructure/campuses, because security starts off with security of the premises, etc., and then you progressively into manufacturing. It's getting into there as well, into manufacturing. Interesting use case I was made aware of is that a lot of factories in India do not have industrial Ethernet, wired industrial Ethernet. And so Ethernet PDU over 5G makes eminent sense to be deployed, because just like we skipped the wired broadband in India in most cases and went straight with 4G FWA, 5G FWA. Similarly, we have this opportunity. So I would say infrastructure, which is, countries like Australia, Indonesia, and even in India, you have ports, mines, and then manufacturing. These are the ones driving. I'll just make one last statement. However, if you look at these are not the maximum number of enterprises. If we have to hit, as Nanda mentioned in his morning's opening statements, to hit 300,000 enterprises, we have to think about how do you enable the small, for a lack of vocabulary, mom and pop enterprises also. Those are the ones that will give this industry the scale that we're looking for also. So let's not forget
Thanks,
this.
Jayant. I think this is very interesting. This is very interesting perspective that you have given. Looking for the moms and the pops of the private networks. I think that's where the things are, and that's where the real adoption is going to be. I think for all the three gentlemen, I'm going to go one by one, but a quick one word or maybe a few words, if you can put in. I think it's going to be like a poll. I'm going to go to all of you. If you had to pick one industry in your region, which will define the private 5G success story over the next 3 years, which would it be and why? Just in like maybe one. So I'll start with Pahari. Maybe Pahari, if you can just quickly give one-liners on that.
I believe in Indonesia, at least, I believe healthcare will be, a big thing in the near future, maybe in the next 3, 4, 5 years, because there are a few things. There is also a regulatory push to do digitalization of the healthcare system, but also the actual fact we see on the field. I've been in a part of the team that's building data center for hospitals within their on-prem, doing their connectivity, doing their IoT patient tracking and the other things inside the hospital, right? For smart hospital. But one area that hasn't been solved for them is actually the heavy lifting for the PACS. PACS is the picture archiving and communication system. That's the radiology, the CT scan, the MRI. All that file has to move to a consultant desk or a inpatient, mobile unit within seconds or minutes. So today with their Wi-Fi network and even fiber, but fiber cannot scale up. That's another issue. They're actually struggling. So I see private 5G can do this heavy lifting into massive amount of data on the imaging side. And on the other side,
Thank you, Pahari. I think your view is on the healthcare sector, right? So you're focusing. Yeah. You see next 3 years down the line, healthcare sector is going to be. So moving on to on your view, what is that one industry segment in your region which will define the private 5G success story over the next 3 years?
So definitely in the last almost a year now, plus a lot of interest evinced by the mines, ports, and all of them, POCs are going on. I think those are the industries which will move on to a production network more in as well as the faster. And I also see heavy engineering industries, okay, where the real-time data transmission from the servers to the actual robotic arm or anything else, where I see a lot of traction is there. Traditionally, these industries also remote, therefore, from a network provisioning or network setup point of view, also it sits well. I think this is the one. Of course, health will go, but the problem I see it in India is that most of the hospitals are all urban-based. So creating a separate network and then that's going to, if we solve the challenge, then automatically that will start up. I think ports, mines, and heavy engineering industries will continue to kind of scale up in the 5G adoption.
Absolutely. Okay. So I think I move. Okay. Jayant, from your perspective, which is that one word? Yeah.
So I agree with, from an India perspective, I agree with Gopal. You have the infra plus the engineering section. One other factor you should not also forget, though they don't come under glamorous thing, but a lot of push by the government for educational institutes, engineering institutes to deploy. So you have a lot of the small mom and pops where we are seeing traction getting into, because they want students to do use cases, etc. So they may not be per se, solving robotic arms or whatever, but they still, at the end of the day, they still are private 5G networks. So there is there are 3,000, 5,000 engineering institutes in India. So yeah.
No, I think very well said.
I think, Jayant, that's a good point. IITs, where the innovation hubs, startup hubs, they become that. I think a lot of work is happening there. I agree.
A lot of work, and I think there are policies now, government policies, which are driving this and helping the adoption of private 5G.
Gentlemen, I'm going to have to cut in now because we're it's been a great discussion, but we're leading into
Thanks.
the next
Thank you.
discussion for L&T.
Thanks, Gopal. Thanks, Pahari.
No, thank you. It's been
Thank you,
really
everyone.
illuminating. All of those things that you brought up in terms of markets that we can look at, and one important takeaway I think that we can lead into to L&T, who are going to be on the next presentation, is this comment that Jayant made that, and this is new to me, that a lot of the factories and production sites in India don't have wired Ethernet. So just like we did the leap from in broadband directly to wireless, that manufacturing in India, Indonesia, much of Asia may go straight to Ethernet PDUs on private 5G. That's a new one for me. Let me invite Kunal back on for the second panel. Kunal?
Yes, I'm there.
Yeah, you can switch on your camera, and who else do we have? Hufadil? Hufadil, Nitin is on.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
How are you?
Mansoor, switch on your camera, please. Hufadil, okay, super. Mansoor is on as well. Who else do we have? And then Lewis? Okay, super as well. So I will exit stage left and hand over to Kunal.
Thank you, Nanda. Thank you so much. So again, a very good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone. So welcome to the APAC Panel 2. In the earlier discussions, we examined a broader ecosystem shaping the private 5G across Asia. In this session, we will go one level deeper into real deployments, real integration challenges, and real enterprise outcomes across India, Indonesia, and Philippines. So we got the panel over here. We'll focus on some of the enterprise end users, system integrators, local spectrum holders, global device. Because private 5G is not succeeded in isolation. It succeeds when these layers align together, technically, commercially, and operationally, as we've heard before as well. And across Asia Pacific, we are now seeing private 5G move into different verticals. We heard about some of the verticals like mining, oil and gas, and then schools, as well as there are some new verticals on public safety and defense, which are moving very fast. And telco-assisted enterprise monetization is something which is of key interest. But scaling developments in Asia Pacific is not trivial. So this is new to Asia Pacific. It's been tried and tested, but it's not trivial. So let me briefly introduce you to our distinguished panelists who are here. We have Hufadil Asari, who is the CTO of PT Corbec. He brings a wealth of experience on the enterprise, and then he has also been instrumental, I would say, introducing Indonesia's first private 5G networks, where they have been very difficult. I mean, these are not easy to do, and I would say not even easy to bring to real deployment. So I think he brings a lot of wealth of experience, even from his background on the enterprise side and from where he comes on the IT side. We also have Nitin Tevatia. He was there earlier, and welcome Nitin back again. He is the delivery head, Next Gen Comms Digital Infrastructure at L&T Tech Services, and representing a very large-scale system integration experience across manufacturing and defense, not only in India, but across globally. So he's pioneering a very large ecosystem of system integrators, where he's also challenging and seeing where things are complicated in terms of regional and also on the ecosystems that are there, which are also sparse and diverse across the regions. Then we have Mr. Mansoor Hanif. He's been the former advisor of Smart Communications in the Philippines. He's offering a strategic operator lens from a very highly dynamic South Asian market. And he comes as well with a lot of experience on the South Asian market side as well. And then we have, lastly, Louis Tan, who's Senior Director for Business Development at Askey. And he's representing the device and CP ecosystem that enables the last mile industrial connectivity, which I think these are wonderful panelists that we have over here. Now, I think to open this session for this panel, I'll start with Hufadil and try to bring the Indonesian operator view onto the real deployments. So, Hufadil, I think my question to you would be that with Indonesia moving towards enterprise-focused 5G and fixed wireless access models, how should license operators position themselves as spectrum providers, managed service providers, or as full digital transformation providers? I mean, either just providing spectrum or managed services or full digital transformation. What's your view on the Indonesian market?
Okay, Pak Kunal, thank you very much for the time. Thank you very much to all. Good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening to all of you. This is a strategic question, I think, from Pak Kunal. You know, currently the market trend indicates that 5G in Indonesia is transitioning actually from consumer centric to enterprise centric. So therefore, we Corbec in 2019 having this license, we believe that we have to become a position as the digital transformation partner. Yes, of course, to go that way to full digital transformation partner, we need sort of, since this is very new to our country, actually, to our system. So we need also to deliver with the managed service provider, inclusively with this, so that my thinking, my strategy in the company, something like that. We believe that during our discussion with many customers that managed service they are asking also in the business. So that I think that the way we are doing, but so by then, partnership is part of our strategy also. So we need to make a broader partnership with not only with the principal but also with all the system integrator to around the country.
Thank you, Parfadit. I think so. This is very well said. So I'll move this question to Nitin Tevatia next. And from a system integrator's point of view, which is India and Asia Pacific, what we are focusing on in this panel, from system integrators, what differentiates a successful industrial private 5G rollout from a technically sound but commercially failed deployment? So I think it is more like a very challenging situation for an integrator in the system integrator in the middle, who has to meet the demands of an operator as well as the end user. How do you see this challenge being solved from your standpoint?
Yeah, thanks, Kunal, and hello to all my co-panelists. Yes, I think this is the question where I think most of the things going forward required. But as LTTS or as a personally I see, I think we offered good latency, higher throughput. I think this may not, we cannot say the success of private 5G. I think till the time we will define some business operating model, which can definitely survive for a plant person, right? Either it will be a CIO and all. And that after 1 or 2 years, if they can scale to other plant or sites, I think that I feel would be a good commercial model. And as a MSI, when we see, because when we see the commercial deployment, production use case honor and the KPI, and how will be the payback model, how we can uplift the operational efficiency, different safety. I think that way, I think it will see. But what I realize where it stop, or I can say stall, most of the enterprises go and say, okay, can you put a POC, or they can buy a kit, private 5G. They put in a lab or some closed environment. But they are nothing like industrial devices. They onboard OT integration, cyber security piece, which is required definitely. So these things till the time will not club as a solution. I think that will definitely not fly as a commercial, because as I showed in my LTTS presentation, TVS use case from POC to I think this production, I know how much we spend the time to bring all the, I think Askey panelists are also here, So different IoT gateways, CPE devices, they also play a crucial role, because most of the OT machine or legacy devices are not 5G capable, right? Either they are serial port, Ethernet port, or some different. And enterprise cannot lay off from the first day when you say, okay, I want to put a private 5G. So I think, as if I want to put a success checklist, definitely the use case ROI, ITOT, architecture, operational efficiency, and definitely the governance should go together.
No, I think very well said, Nitin. So this is where the complexity of being a system integrator and challenging to fit in different buckets at the same time comes into play. I move to Mansoor Hanif next, and Mansoor, I'd like to see your view on how do you see private 5G evolving as a separate enterprise network domain, or eventually converging into public 5G infrastructure. Where do you see and how you've seen the markets evolving, and especially in Philippines? You've worked a lot on those strategic evolution part of it on the ASEAN market as well.
Yeah, thank you, Kunal. Yeah, I didn't spend a lot of time in Southeast Asia, by the way. It's just 1 year, but it's enough to perhaps have an insider's view. Well, first of all, I'll just start with saying it's a tough market, especially Philippines is a really hard market. So I think that most operators are very much focused on the bottom line in the consumer space. If you look at the specifics of the Philippines in particular, and this probably goes for a lot of countries in ASEAN, but especially in the Philippines, the ARPU is very low. So it's like $2 to $3, something like that. Extremely low. Similar to India, I would say. It's got very high usage and very high spectrum usage as a result, which means there's very little spectrum available for private networks, especially not from reusing the public networks in most areas. The penetration is saturated, so it's about 110, 120%. There's a big percentage of dual SIM usage already. There's about 20, 30%. It's very highly prepaid. It's one of the things that shocked me when I went to Asia after, excuse me, after spending so many years in the UK, where there was a lot of postpaid. In Asia, especially in the Philippines, it's like 95, 96% prepaid. So it's crazy competitive. And you really need to fight hard to stay relevant to your consumer customers. And that's where most of the money comes from. It's a high volume market. And currently there's no, as in you've heard also from our colleagues from other countries, there's no specific dedicated spectrum for private 5G, partially due to these reasons. So I think in terms of the results is that private 5G, as we've heard from Harik and everybody else here, and even you said it, Kunal, even though we never mentioned it in this subject, you said, let's talk about enterprise, because that's all there is, right? So it's P5G is owned by enterprise today. But I think that can change, and I'm happy to discuss a little bit later in the panel on what can happen. But today, all the operators, it's their business teams that are driving private 5G. There is demand, but they're all the use cases that you've heard described so well by previous speakers. Mining is a big one, industrial, remote campuses, manufacturing, wherever there's a need and connectivity from the public networks perhaps is not perfect. Customers are ready to pay more for have guaranteed availability and a dedicated bespoke network. The good thing for the operators there is that they have excess spectrum in those areas because you're not using all your spectrum in those areas at all. So it's a kind of win-win now at the moment. But what that means, it's very hard for anybody else to come in, especially because there's no spectrum. Where I was working in Smart Philippines, they're also part of a large group, as we heard from Axiata. They have a lot of mining and other industrial enterprises. So there's a good demand from the internal group. What's changing in Philippines, and it might be something that I'm not sure what's happening in other countries in Asia, is there is a movement to look at spectrum for new uses. And in particular, I think the millimeter wave spectrum is underused. So it was very interesting to hear from Sumitomo what they're doing in millimeter wave. I've always been a big believer in millimeter wave, but it's good to see it happening now. And I think that's an area that there is spectrum available if people want to. But there's also what we call in the Philippines, the Conectadong Pinoy Act, which was recently passed. Not the most popular among all operators, and it's quite controversial. But as part of that, which is now being implemented, there is a review of the usage of spectrum around the country, and there is a potential for the regulator to reallocate some of that spectrum if they feel it's not being used. Now, the full rules of how that's going to be calculated aren't yet clear yet, but what I do know is that there has been already some interest from potential private 5G networks to request that they be allowed to have a local zoning, even for public consumption in certain areas, and to be allocated spectrum just in a certain local area, to roll out private 5G networks. That would be something very much more similar to what was done in the UK when I was a regulator there at Ofcom. But I'm happy to expand on, that's where we are today. Where we can go in the future, I'm happy to expand on it later in the panel.
Amazing. No, I think very well said, Mansoor. This is exactly where we see there's a transition from a very captive and a closed ecosystem, where there is a drive from the enterprise which is pushing for open market as much as possible. And of course, there's going to be a lot of complexity in getting all of this thing together. And I move, talking about complexity, to the device ecosystem, to Louis Tan. So, Louis, from a device and CP ecosystem perspective, what is the biggest bottleneck?
Hello. Hello.
I think we've lost Kunal there.
Kumar.
Yeah, I agree with you. Pak Kunal lost this connection.
Yeah. But maybe I'll come in.
Kunal is back.
Are you back, Kunal?
Okay. Yes. Oh, it was me. Okay, sorry, I didn't realize I was out. Okay, cool. So, Louis, I'll just repeat the same question again. So, from a device and CP ecosystem perspective, what is the bottleneck today? Is it industrial device availability, cost of certification, or it is interoperability? Where do you see the device ecosystem maturity and problem statements?
Hello. Good day, everyone. So I'm Louis. I'm the Senior Business Development Director of Askey. So I'm representing Askey today. I have 2 decades of experience in telecommunications. And Kumar, thanks for inviting me to this panel. It's a very great panel. And about your questions, about availability, I think that the availability issue has been improved a lot as compared to 2 years ago, when most of the 5G devices are focused on FWA, CPEs, and also headsets. But nowadays, we are seeing more variants of 5G device available. So we have dongles, we have industrial routers, like what Nitin mentioned, we have industrial routers with RS4 connectivity, Ethernet port connectivities that can be connected to the industrial devices. And I believe that the availability issue will get better as time passes, as more and more people adopt 5Gs, especially the operators. But cost-wise, I think it's still expensive for 5G devices. We would love to get the cost down to similar like LTE prices. I think that's very important. And in Askey, we are also developing devices using the RedCap as chipset to get the cost down. But one of the challenges for the OEM that we see is that because 5G frequency is scattered, especially for private 5Gs in different countries, there may be different bands. So if you want to design a device that is robust and cover all the countries, it will be expensive. So you need to consider all the radios, and that it will be expensive. But if we minimize it and focus it on certain countries, then scalability becomes the questions. So hopefully, as more and more deployments pick up, we can solve these issues. And we are also working closely with our SoC partners like Qualcomm to get the cost down and to get get the devices available for the enterprises. But I think the most challenging thing that I see is interoperability part. I think for the enterprise, their vision that when they purchase a device and connect the enterprise private 5G SIM card, and they are able to connect to the private network directly, because they view this, their views come from how their experience with the public network. But little did they realize that for the public network, even with the handset that we have now, actually the operators and the handset provider did a lot of work, like pre-programming, and also do a lot of testing with the handsets. Like for Apple, they will do drive tests around the country before they launch the model to sell to the operators. So the enterprise are not aware of all these things done by the operators. And for enterprise deployment, without the role of the operator, then SI become a very important role, like people like Nitin with their experience to test all the devices. So we in Askey, we work very closely with our SI providers. We support them for their technology wise to solve their problems, and SI build their experience and then deliver to the operators. So we have some good partners in Japan, like Entity East, that we are working with. They are helping us to manage our 5G serving 5G system as a managed service provider in Japan, and we have tens of networks deployed in Japan. So I will pause here for a while, and
Yes.
if there's any...
Well, very nicely said, Luis. I think interoperability is the key, which is the success criteria, as we heard in the previous panel as well. Use cases drive the private network adoption.
Yes.
And interoperability is what the use cases mean for, right? And they stand for. So I think...
5 minutes.
Yeah. Okay, so I think we'll make it a quick round of one single question. It'll be like a poll that I'm going to have to everyone, and maybe each one of you could just help me with one-liners, two-liners onto that. So, Hufadil, I think I'll come back to you on this. What is the single most important decision an enterprise must get it right before moving from pilot to production private 5G networks? What's your view on that? Just one-liner or two-liners on this.
Based on our experience, Kunal, so directly answering your question, actually, we have to have an access to get all those requirements from the end user. Since that, other than that way, then the problem is coming to the deployment model and everything regarding that integration with all existing, all the telecommunication and integration to all IT system over there. That will be problem if we don't have any, all the requirement, put it in the one document and maybe discussing with that, so that, after POC done, actually, we have to make a sort of a complete design. So define technical requirement is must in there to define how justify the ROI itself. For me, is during our working with many enterprise, when we've done with the POC, actually, one of the thing we are requiring maybe need only 7 or 10 days to maximize all the implementation plan. So choosing development model will be addressing the device ecosystem in there, also the securing spectrum that we are having only, and the thing that we need to also answering is how do we support the operational in IT and OT itself. That the way we are thinking on, maybe is that the high value of the business can be used.
Absolutely, very well said, Fadil. Moving on to Nitin, in terms of your view, what is that one right move before moving from pilot to production for private networks?
Yes, I think we also mentioned, but yes, from my point of view, I think who will own the end-to-end service? Either it is a KPI security life cycle, because when enterprise start thinking and they cannot answer, or we cannot answer that who will operate NOC, SOC, who will manage SIM, who will manage device onboarding, how the changes will happen, how the OT incidents are handled, then I think rollout, till the time rollout template will not work, I think even pilot also will success, then it may stall and not go to production. So I think from my point of view, I think in single line, I can say we should start thinking private 5G as a solution, but not only a connectivity only.
No, very well said. Very well said, Nitin. I think it is a solution. It is not appliances or the products and which makes it. It's a complete end-to-end solution play as it goes. So, Mansoor, from your standpoint, how do you see that we need to get the enterprise need to get that one right decision before moving from pilot to production?
Well, I think that my colleagues have answered that very well. There's not much to add, but I would say that what the enterprises need is to have courage and to be forward-looking to move to production. But obviously, they need to be practical in terms of having a good set of KPIs, which would trigger that. Once they hit those KPIs, there should be no hesitation, and then you go to production. You'll suffer, but then you'll get ahead. One thing I would like to add very quickly, though, is just to answer what Nanda put as the main question: how do we scale? How do we get tens of thousands of enterprises over the next 5 years? I really think we have an opportunity now with the two enablers. Standalone is here. Standalone was always holding back private 5G. It's hugely simplifying. Devices are still expensive, but they're coming down rapidly. We have RedCap and consumer devices, the consumers that are leading the take-up of 5G now. Now is the time. The other big thing is eSIM is coming in. That's going to make it a lot easier to provision customers for private 5G networks. Final thing, which is the biggest, is the open gateway ecosystem. And we should look at that as a huge opportunity for enterprise to allow for all types of applications to reach their corporate networks. We have now the AI agent economy that's emerging. We need to connect the AI agents securely to the enterprise databases. There's the MCP protocol, which allows that. The GSMA and camera API movement has already embraced that. There's an opportunity now to position private 5G as the way GPU enabled the AI economy. Private 5G can enable the AI agent economy for enterprise, and that's really what's going to be an enabler to scale.
No, you very well said on the enablers. I think they are very, very, very truly aligned to what is happening today and very near future. I think this is where we're going to. The last, I'll put the same question to Louis Dan as well. Louis, from your standpoint, how do you see what is that one important decision with the enterprise should make to move from pilot to production?
So I think from pilot, we focus on function, focus on performance and test the use case. But when we switch to production environment, I think like what Nitin greatly described, we need to define roles and responsibilities, workflows, and all that. Because when you introduce a new software version, all this need to go through robust testings before going on to the network. All these are workflows, and this helps to ensure that the network is working properly when it's in productions and reduce the downtime. So SIs plays very, very important roles in this.
Maybe I can add one more, Pak Kunal. That's if you go back to your previous question, actually, as a partner, maybe that's the way how to answer the question, the all inquiry by the end user. As digital transformation partner, might be how we solve this the smooth transition from POC until the production. I think maybe at the Pak Luis.
Excellent.
That's it.
Thanks,
I think thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much for a very, very interactive and an amazing insight. I think these were all real insights and real value proposition and from the leaders in the market industry. And over to you, Nanda. We are here and I think the Asia Pacific is going wild. We had 2 panels and I think we hope next time we can have 4 panels and then we can bring in more people and get to more interesting topics. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome, Pak.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
so
you.
with that, we have sunset now in Asia Pac and move into the European morning. So bonjour, Europe. I know